I have made a makeshift cushion here using upholstery vinyl. It's got padding in it. It's very similar to what a normal cushion would be, whether it is in furniture or automotive or any kind of padded vinyl, boat seats. This video is going to demonstrate the process that you're going to use in just about any kind of what we'll refer to as soft vinyl. This is soft, flexible vinyl, and it works on automotive, furniture, marine, any kind of application where you'll find the soft upholstery type vinyl. There's no damage in this piece as yet, and I did that for a reason, because the very first thing that you need to do before you start any repair is to match the grain pattern of the vinyl. We'll use a graining pad. These pads are made by you, the technician, and I'm going to demonstrate how to make them. In the course of your work, you will ultimately end up with a vast assortment of grain pads. Each one of these that you see in here are all different grain patterns from different types of leather. Once you've made a grain pattern, it will last indefinitely, and you'll use it over and over and over again. So it's really something that you, after you've been in the business for a while, you won't need to be making any more grain patterns. You'll just be sorting through the ones that you have made over the years. So when you're first starting, especially, you have no choice but to make one of these grain patterns. To do that, we're going to use the DT 118 graining compound, and we're going to use the DT 119 catalyst. This is a two-part mixture. You mix the catalyst into the graining compound, mix it well, and it will cure on its own. To do this, simply open the jar of the graining compound, and I use a palette knife because you'll want to stir this up considerably before you use it. If you first dip in there, you'll find that there are chunks that have settled to the bottom. These need to be stirred. So you'll want to stir this very well, get all of those chunks mixed in, and get a smooth consistency to the material. Doesn't take a lot because it does mix up pretty well very quickly, but you want to make sure that you do this, especially if your jar of compound has sat on a shelf for any length of time. It will most definitely need to be stirred. You can't shake it. It's too thick of a material to shake, so it has to be stirred. And I'll check it for any chunks that may still exist. Still a few in there, so I'll stir it some more. And I'll just continue to stir it until there are no chunks remaining. All right, once that is stirred up, you'll want to get a little cup. I use little Dixie cups, paper cups. And I'm going to pour about an ounce, ounce and a half, depending on the size of grain pattern that I want to make. I like to make them large enough because since I'm going to have this for a long period of time, I will make it large enough so that it fits a lot of different applications. Once I've got that in my cup, I want to take the 118 catalyst, and I'm going to put about 6 to 8 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, in this situation, because we're working a video, I want it to set up a little bit quicker. So I'm going to just put a couple more drops in. The more catalyst that you add, the quicker it will set up. And once you become familiar with the material and how much time you have to work with it, you'll pretty much learn how much catalyst to put in. The less catalyst you put in, it'll take a lot longer to cure. It will ultimately cure if you put less catalyst in it, but it will take a considerable longer amount of time. 6 to 8 drops is generally pretty sufficient. It keeps you on the safe side so that it doesn't begin to set up before you have an opportunity to actually spread it. You want to stir this very well. Get that catalyst mixed into the entire mixture. And then we're going to take this material and we're going to spread it right onto the vinyl. This is the reason I didn't make any damage to this vinyl at this point, because I need a nice clean area. You want to make certain not to put it over the damaged area, because that impression of the damage will be in this graining pad that you're going to make. So you need to find a good, smooth, clean area where the vinyl is not damaged and where there's a good grain pattern that you can get. And I just spread it out smooth and thin. No particular shape at this point. You can get creative, and I've seen a lot of people that will they'll lay masking tape down and they'll make a nice little square pattern. You can do that if you feel comfortable doing so. In my experience, it's not necessary. This material will settle down. You'll get little air bubbles, as you can see, coming up. You can pop those out with your finger. The important thing is that the material does not set up too quickly so that those air bubbles don't remain on the surface of the vinyl. You want those air bubbles to come up to the surface so that you have a nice, flat, clean surface of grain pattern on the underneath side of this material. This will generally set up using 6 to 8 drops of compound. It will generally set up within 10, maybe 15 minutes, depending on temperature and humidity. If it's cold in the area that you're working, it will take longer. If it's higher temperatures, it will take less time. You can actually use a hair dryer on high heat and apply heat to the material. That will cause it to start curing quicker as well. If you find that you have not put enough of the catalyst in, you can encourage the curing time with that heat from a hair dryer. Don't use a heat gun. That could cause you problems with the vinyl itself. But heat from a hair dryer works well. This will ultimately be set up, like I said, in about 10 minutes. During that time, you can get the rest of your materials in place and ready to start the repair. Get your repair area prepped, because you'll find that there's going to be a lot of times where you'll actually make a grain pattern from another area of the seat that you'll be working on, choosing the same vinyl with the same pattern, which allows you to start doing your prep work and all of the other necessary things in the process before you need to use the grain pattern. So we're going to let this cure for a little while, and we'll be back in a few minutes. So it's been about 10 minutes, and it's cured well. There's no tackiness to the grain pad that we've put on there. It's good and solid, and we can peel it off. And to do that, all I'm going to do is just lift one corner of it, and then we're just going to peel it right off of the vinyl. Once you've peeled it off, examine the underside. It should be perfectly smooth and have an exact mirror image replica of the pattern of the vinyl itself. If you find any areas, such I've got a couple here, some little air bubbles that did not dissipate, and I also have some area here that didn't cure out, probably because I didn't get the catalyst mixed in well enough. Not a problem, because we're going to trim this piece to make it work to where it's pretty effective on all the repairs that we'll be doing in the future with it. You'll also notice that I didn't clean off my palette knife. I just let the material cure on here because it's much easier to clean it up by just peeling the material off of the palette knife rather than trying to wipe it off with a paper towel. There will be some residue of material that did not cure, did not get mixed up with the catalyst, and I'll just wipe that excess residue off. So my palette knife now is ready to go in our process. And I want to trim this a little bit. I don't like these little tails that are hanging in the rough edges and so forth. So I'm going to use a pair of scissors. And I'll just take one end of the pad and I'm just going to cut it in kind of a circular area. The reason for that is if I'm working on a corner, of a cushion and I've got a tear that goes down like this, I can actually use this and wrap it around that corner when I'm trying to impress the grain pattern into it. Another thing that I will do, I will cut a flat side straight, just like that, so that if I'm working on a seam area where two pieces are sewn together and I need to get right up against that seam to make a repair, I can lay that against the seam and I'll have a nice straight edge on the seam area that I'm going to repair. The next thing that I will do, I will cut, I'm going to trim this a little bit more so that I can get an angle. I want an angle cut. Something of that nature. That way, if I'm working on where two seams come together at a 90-degree angle, I can actually put that corner right down in that seam area and get my grain impressed into that. So having your piece trimmed in such a way will help you to make a whole lot of different repairs using the same grain pattern. And it's as simple as that. This grain pattern now, it's very flexible, very tough. You will use it over and over and over again. If you take care of them, don't lose them, don't damage them by cutting them or whatever, they'll last for years. And you'll never have to make another one of that pattern again. But now you'll also notice on this piece of vinyl, there's some residue left from the material that we had put on there. If we had done this on a panel in the seat that we weren't intending to work on, we will need to clean that off and get that material off of that seat. I recommend that you do that using the vinyl cleaner first. Try the vinyl cleaner because most times that will take it off. Just spray the cleaner on. Use a towel and just scrub over the area. And that will clean up any residue that might have remained on the surface. Occasionally it won't, depends on the vinyl, the age of the vinyl, the condition of the vinyl. Sometimes it will leave marks that are a little bit still visible, in which case clean it with the vinyl cleaner and go back over it after it's dry with some vinyl conditioner, and that will take care of the problem. Now, This particular piece has no damage to it, so let's go ahead and make some. We're just gonna put a nice little V cut in this. Something of that nature. Typical damage that you'll find. Now, in our process, we can do virtually any size of repair. I've done areas that this size where that much of the vinyl is actually missing. You get to that size of a repair, that is a rather involved process. Takes time and it takes a lot of material. I don't necessarily recommend that you do those types of repairs. You have to understand your limitations, and sometimes it's better to replace a panel than it is to try and repair it. But in this situation, this is an easy repair, and it's a quick repair to do. To start with, again, we want to use the vinyl cleaner, and we want to clean that surface off. There's always on vinyl, there's a lot of gunk, and we have no idea what the customer has placed on this vinyl. A lot of people use Armor All. They believe in this stuff, but Armor All is nothing but pure silicone. And what it will do is it will soak into that vinyl, and it will make repair impossible. It will allow the repair materials to peel off at a later time. Any color coats that we put on there will peel off, and it must be removed. Because we don't know what has been applied to this vinyl, we want to take every precaution. So the first thing that I do is I always use the vinyl cleaner. I also use the vinyl cleaner because it will remove the majority of the surface material that's on there that we want to take off, and will not dilute the vinyl prep or the silicone wash, whichever we're going to use. It will help us to not use as much of those materials and make the prep work a lot faster. So once we've got it clean, we want to use the vinyl prep. And I mentioned the silicone wash, silicone wax remover. If you notice that the vinyl has been overloaded with Armor All and vinyl conditioners, silicone conditioners, that type of thing, you would be wise in washing it down with that silicone wash first to remove any of that excess foreign matter that would be on there. The vinyl prep will remove it, but it will take considerable more vinyl prep to remove that material and then do the prep work as well. So it's actually more economical for you as a technician to use the silicone wash first. We're not going to do that in this case because it's not on the vinyl, but we are going to use the vinyl prep. So the vinyl prep, you want to be rather generous with the vinyl prep material. I will pour a fairly heavy amount onto a cloth, and then I will wash over the area completely and just scrub it very well with the vinyl prep. Especially after having the graining pad material on there. This is a silicone material, so it will leave a lot of residue. So I'll want to wash all of that off, make sure that it is non-existent on the surface. You'll also notice too that I'm doing the entire panel. I prefer that you do work from seam to seam. It's much easier to do an entire panel than it is to try and do a small spot area and then blend that spot area in. It takes much more time, much more effort. It's so much faster, and you get so much better of a job doing the entire panel. Worst case scenario, if you do the entire panel, it'll look like the panel's been replaced, which is far better than having a big old spot in the middle of it. So I'm going to use a little bit more vinyl prep. Scrub over the area well. And I will immediately take a dry cloth and wipe that wet vinyl prep off the surface. The vinyl prep is going to dissolve those silicones, oils, any kind of foreign matter that has existed on the surface. We'll dissolve those, bring them up off the surface. If we just allow it to dry, it will settle back down and we've accomplished very little. So by wiping it off with a dry cloth, we're actually absorbing that material up into the cloth and it's being removed. So now we're down to the raw vinyl itself. That's exactly where we want to be. Now, once we've done the vinyl prep, we need to dry it, make sure that it's completely dry before we proceed. I will use a hair dryer for this procedure. And I want to open this flap up so that it dries around the edge as well, because our vinyl prep has soaked into the edge of that vinyl. That's sufficient. Now, because this is all the way through and you can see the foam underneath, we will need to use a sub patch. We have the linen sub patch material, which I love to use because it's thin and it will be invisible once it's placed underneath the vinyl, especially when you have a piece of vinyl that's stretched very tightly over the padding. Anything that you put under there, if it's too thick, can be visible. It will raise up and you'll actually see the sub patch through the vinyl. But using this, it's thin enough, but yet it's strong enough to give us the strength and support that we need from underneath. I like to cut my sub patch about 1/2 inch larger in all directions than the hole itself. So it will ultimately end up being about 1/2 inch bigger on all sides than the hole that we're working with. And that's going to be about the size of our sub patch that's going to fit underneath our repair very nicely. Now what I will do from here, I'm going to fold this sub patch in half. And I'm going to use my scissors and I'm going to cut the corners off. This is going to give us a little bit of a rounded shaped sub patch. The sharp corners being gone, now will allow us to place that sub patch underneath the vinyl very easily. The sharp corners, when you try to slide it under there, have a tendency to catch on the vinyl and they'll fold up and then you'll have lumps underneath the vinyl. By cutting those corners off, it's much easier to lay them flat. To get our sub patch into place, I'm going to use a pair of tweezers and I'm going to grab just one edge of the sub patch. I will lift the flap and we're just going to slide that right into the hole. Once I get it slid in, I'm not going to slide it all the way. I want to get this edge to where I'm able to grab it again. I'll release the tweezers and I'm going to spread them open. And what that will do is push those edges down. I'll then come back, open the flap up again. I've got a folded edge here. I'm going to try and push that down in a little bit. Then I'm going to grab the other edge, lock my tweezers onto it, and I'm going to pull back the other way. Now I don't want to pull too far because I don't want to pull my sub patch out of position. You can actually, if you feel comfortable, before you put the sub patch in, you can actually take an ink pen, mark an X on the center of it, and when that X shows up through here, you'll know that it's centered. Now I'll just use my tweezers again, and I'm going to push these edges down, go all the way around that sub patch, and make certain that all edges are down flat. I'll run my fingers over, and if I feel any areas that feel like they're raised up a little bit, I'll take my tweezers, go back in, push those areas around, try to work them flat. At this point, I don't really feel anything that I'm concerned about. And I think we've got our sub patch into position where it needs to be. Now we need to lock this down. The sub patch doesn't just lay there. It helps to give support from underneath. It does two things actually. It helps to support the repair from underneath. It also prevents our repair material from getting down into the foam of the cushion and locking our material to the foam. We don't want that to happen because this vinyl is meant to slide on that foam. When you sit on it, that vinyl slides across the cushion underneath. We need that to remain. The sub patch material prevents our repair material from locking the vinyl to the foam underneath. So to begin the actual repair process, we're going to use the DT120 vinyl repair compound. This is a clear material. It is heat cured. Requires a great deal of heat. It will not cure on its own just by drying. You have to cure it with heat. I will start by taking just a small amount. I'm going to lift up the flap, and I'm going to slide that repair material underneath and get it spread onto the top of the sub patch material, the bottom side of the vinyl. And I will do that all the way around the damaged area. I want to be careful not to spread it too far because I don't want to overshoot my sub patch underneath. Then I will take my palette knife and I'm going to gently press everything into place. And that looks pretty good to me. Now, you can cure this right now, and what the heat that we're going to use will cure the repair compound underneath and the vinyl, and it will lock that repair into place. What I use for a heat source, this is a flameless butane torch. No flame comes out the tip. There's a little catalytic converter here that burns the gas inside so that no flame comes out. Using a flame type torch will cause you a great deal of problems because it is extremely difficult to get sufficient heat on that with a flame without burning the vinyl itself. So using a flameless torch is the best way to go. You can use heat guns. There are advantages and disadvantages to a heat gun. The biggest disadvantage, especially in a repair such as this, heat guns tend to put out too much heat in too broad of an area. I want my heat focused and concentrated only in this area. I don't want to get heat out here. There's no damage out here, and I don't want to create any more issues out here. So I want to focus my heat and concentrate it right here. That's why this is so beneficial, because that's exactly what it'll do. You'll put your heat exactly where you want it. Now to light this, there's a number of torches on the market. This one happens to be a Master Ultra Torch. This is a UT200. They also make a UT200SI, which is a self-igniter. I'm not crazy about those because the self-igniters tend to go bad. And when they go bad, the whole unit is no good. This one you manually light. You'll open the door. First you'll turn the gas on. It does have a valve to adjust the flow of the gas. Open the door, take a lighter, and you'll hear it light up. hold that door open for a minute or so to let the catalytic converter warm up. You can also look down into the tip. You'll see it starting to glow red. When it starts to glow red, that means that it's safe to close the door. And I believe we've got it. Yes. When you look down inside, it will be glowing red. Now, I don't think you'll be able to see it on the video. Maybe you will. But that lets you know that it's operating correctly. Now, the grain pattern that we just used, sometimes you'll find that the vinyl has a specific direction in which it flows. This particular piece does not, so it's not critical which way we use the grain pattern. But some vinyls do have a directional pattern to them. In other words, when you look at it, it looks like the grain is facing this way. If you have your grain pattern to where it's facing this way, it's not going to look good. So make sure that your grain pattern is lined up with the direction of your vinyl. But like I say, in most cases, a lot of vinyls don't have a directional pattern. I'm going to use the heat gun and I'm going to begin heating over this area. Now this process won't take a great length of time, generally a minute or so. When you look at the surface of that vinyl, you'll see it begin to turn shiny and smoking, and that's exactly what we want it to do. I don't want to burn it, but I do want to get it melted, because vinyl repair is nothing more than a welding process. Once it's hot, I will put my grain pad directly over it, and I will apply light pressure from my hand, slightly more than the weight of my hand. I don't want to press hard on it. I just want to impress that grain pattern back into the surface, and I want to lay all that vinyl down flat. And that looks pretty good. Now, we've got these edges, and you'll notice that when you put the heat from the torch onto the vinyl, these opened up considerably. The vinyl kind of shrunk. That's typical on vinyl that is stretched over a pad of this nature. And when you put the heat to it, it kind of softens it so that those will open up. And that's fine. That should be expected. What we're going to do from this point now is we're just going to fill in those gaps, those areas where the vinyl has separated. I want to put just enough compound in just to fill those areas. I'm not spreading it. I'm not going beyond the edges of the little crevices. I want to keep my material right in there. And I want to spread it nice and smooth. No ridges, no high spots, no low spots if possible. And then we're going to cure it again. The advantage to this repair process is you can see what you're accomplishing. And again, applying the heat, no more than 30 seconds to a minute. Slight pressure from my hand. If you push too hard, you'll distort the vinyl. And when you pull this up, you'll have rolls and ridges and all kinds of things that you're going to wonder, what am I going to do with it? But just light pressure, enough to impress that grain pattern back into the repair material, is all you want to do. Now, at this point, our repair is done. It's not going anywhere. It's strong. It'll take anything you want to put to it. However, aesthetically, it doesn't look good. It's still, we've got some low areas. We've got some areas that need to be dressed out. Now, by twisting it the way that I just did there, I kind of distorted things. So I'm going to heat this up again. Let it relax. Put it back into place. and we can proceed from here. Now I want to look across the surface and let the light reflect across the surface so that I can see where the bad areas are. At this point I'm seeing right along this area there's a little bit of indentation. Same here, same down here, just a little bit right here. And that's to be expected. This is a process that you will do probably numerous times, and you just continue doing the same thing, spreading more compound in, applying heat, applying the grain pattern. Try to keep any ridges that may develop from spreading the compound out of there. And again, we're going to put a little bit more heat to it. You want that material smoking. You don't want to burn it, but you do want it good and hot and smoking. Because as I mentioned, this is a welding process. We're melting the vinyl and we're melting the repair compound and then pressing the two together with the grain pad so that they become one. And just probably one more little coat and I think we're going to be done. You'll notice too that I'm going out beyond the repair material just a little bit to heat the vinyl up. That allows the grain pattern to blend into the existing pattern. So if you focus just on the repair compound itself without heating up some of the surrounding vinyl, you will get a distinct line between the two patterns. But by heating up a little larger area, going into the good vinyl a bit, you will be able to blend that grain pattern in to where it can't be detected. And this doesn't look too awful bad. I've got one little spot over here. I've got a little bit of a ridge. I didn't get the material pulled down far enough, so I'll just put a little bit more compound right there. This time I'm going to make sure to pull that stuff down with my finger. Kind of feather it down just a little bit. Now I don't need so much heat. I only want to get enough heat to soften that material so that it will accept the grain pattern. And again, pressure is the key. You want enough pressure to get the pattern impressed, but not so much pressure that you distort the vinyl. A little bit more over here. Just a couple of seconds with the heat is all that it requires. Now, didn't do it, so I'm going to have to put a little bit more compound in. You'll also notice that I'm using just the heel of my hand. I don't want to use my palm, and I definitely don't want to use my fingers. My palm, I will get too much pressure out here, but the indentation, the concave of my palm, I won't get enough pressure in the middle. My fingers, I'll get a lot of pressure on the fingers themselves, but no pressure in between my fingers, and so I'll get ridges. Using the back and the heel of my hand, I can actually focus where that pressure goes. And a little spot over here that I need to fix. And now I look over the surface of it to see if I can find any bad areas. Things look pretty good to me from this point. So I believe we're ready to begin finishing out the area. Once we get color code on here, it will also show us some areas that may need to be further touched up. But at this point, I'm relatively satisfied with the repair. And what you can see there, I don't know what it looks like in the video at this point, but that's what we have. So I am going to set things up to do our refinishing, and I'll be back with you in just a few minutes. Okay, I've got my area set up. I've put some drop cloths around so I don't make a mess. I've got my color coat prepared. I've got all of my tools necessary to apply the color coat. The thing that I need more than anything will be the hairdryer. We're going to apply the color coat. Now before we get to actual application, I want to wash this area off again using the vinyl prep. The reason, the transfer of oils and silicones has gotten all over the surface of this, from my fingers and also from the graining pad that we were using to impress the grain pattern in. So I don't need to scrub this like I did previously. All I want to do is just remove those little bits of residue that got placed onto the surface during the repair process and a little bit after, moving it around to get things ready. And again, I don't want to let it dry on there. I want to wipe off any excess prior to applying the color coat material. Same thing applies. We're going to dry it. And now the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to take our color coat and we're just going to spray a light mist onto the surface. I'll then use a applicator sponge and we're going to wipe that color coat right into the vinyl. That vinyl prep that we used remains effective on the surface of the vinyl for about 90 minutes once it's been applied. What that means is that it has opened the pores of that vinyl so that the vinyl becomes receptive to the repair materials and the color coats that we've applied to it, and allows them to take permanent root. After 90 minutes, the effects of the vinyl prep begin to dissipate. The vinyl starts to close up again. So we have a 90-minute working period once we've applied the vinyl prep. Wiping the first coat on, you can see it's very thin. It barely covers anything, but I've worked it into the vinyl and I've got a nice smooth base from which to work from. I will dry that with the hairdryer. More than likely, I won't need my applicator sponge any longer. I'm just going to use the Prevol sprayer. The thing I like about the Prevost sprayer, it puts a nice even spray out and it blends in very nicely to any surrounding areas. It also creates what we refer to as a heavy orange peel effect. In other words, when that dye from the sprayer lands onto the surface, so long as we haven't applied it heavily, it will create a bit of an orange peel, which will do nothing less than accentuate the grain pattern that we're trying to achieve and help to blend it into the existing area. So it's a benefit to our repair process and how it will turn out. I want to hold this about 12 to 16 inches from the surface. And again, I'm going to spray a nice light coat. I'll still see my damage underneath. That's a good thing. We want to keep our color coat as light and thin as possible. We don't want to overload it. If you put too much on, it will begin to fill in the little grain patterns and little grooves that exist, and now your piece will take on a fake, painted, artificial look. So by keeping the material very light and thin, keeping that orange peel pattern accentuated, it will end up looking like a natural piece of vinyl. Going to need a little bit more. This time I'm going to focus right on the repair compound so that I get a bit more depth to the color in that area. Again, just light and thin. It will generally take about 3 to 4 coats of the color material, which is why I like to use a hair dryer. It really speeds up the drying time and the entire process for that matter. One more time I'm going to go over this area because it's still just a little bit discolored. At this point, I want to examine over across the surface to make sure that my repair looks the way that I want it to look. Once you've applied the color coat material, it has a tendency to show all blemishes, which is a good thing because that way we can tell whether we need to do any more to our repair. I feel like I've got a bad spot here that looks like I've got a couple of ridges that need to be taken care of. I have some areas out here where the grain pattern is not blending really well. So I am going to continue working from this. I do not need to remove the color coat material. I can work over top of this. And what that means is I'm going to take a little bit of the vinyl repair compound and I'm going to put in this area right here. So I want to spread it very smooth and very thin. And then I want to make sure that I have no ridges. I'm going to fire my torch up again. There it goes. And I want to be careful with my heat now. I don't want to put too much, because if we put too much heat to this, it will cause the color coat to bubble. Don't want that. So we want to be careful. We'll keep the torch away at a safe distance, but still get heat to our repair material. Once the repair material starts to turn shiny, we're going to reapply our grain pattern. Again, same type of pressure, very little pressure, just nothing more than the weight of my hand primarily. And we hold it there until the compound cools. If we try to lift it up too soon, we can pull some of it out. So we want to make sure that it's cool before you lift the grain pad. And obviously it doesn't get that hot, because you'll see I'm not using any kind of protection for my hands. So it's not like it's burning anything. And let's see what that looks pretty good right there. Another little spot down here. Very small amounts, spread very thinly and very evenly. You see how I keep the tip of that torch moving constantly. I never let it sit in one spot for any length of time. It will burn the vinyl. That looks pretty good. I think this area over here just needs a little bit of heat and a little bit of pressure from the grain pad. Again, I want to be careful not to cook that color coat material. I want to bring the heat up slowly, so I pay attention to the surface as I'm applying the heat to make sure that it's not bubbling or burning anything. Hold that in place long enough so that it cools, so that everything stays in place once I lift the graining pad. And I think that looks pretty good. Shut our torch off, and let's apply a little bit more repair color coat. Don't need to wipe it this time. We're just going to spray a light mist. This entire repair can be done in less than 30 minutes. I'm going a little bit slower than I would go if I were actually doing the job for real. But it's a very quick repair, relatively simple to accomplish. A little bit more color coat. Like I say, I keep the color coat very thin and try to encourage that orange peel effect a little bit with Freewell sprayer. You can use a spray gun. I use a Badger airbrush a lot. I'll use, if I'm doing a big job, I'll use an HVLP touch-up gun. But when I'm working on a repaired area such as this, I will almost always use a Freewell sprayer at least to do the repair area because of the orange peel pattern that it creates. And that's looking pretty good. I think I'm going to do one more coat over the entire area now. We'll dry that. We talk about 3 or 4 coats, sometimes even more, but you have to keep in mind that each of these coats is very thin, very light. We're not overloading it. We're not trying to cover anything up in one coat. We're keeping the color coat very, very thin. And so we're not actually putting on anywhere near as much as it looks like or appears that we are. And I believe that's pretty much got our repair. That looks pretty good. Satisfactory repair. It's tough. You can pull on it, you can twist on it, you can do whatever you want with it. It is not going to come apart. The vinyl will split somewhere else before that repair does. So, that is our basic vinyl repair using the DT120 on soft vinyl upholstery. After a few hours, you can put vinyl conditioner on this, and I highly recommend that you do. I don't want to do it this soon. It can be done this soon, but if you do, you will take some of the color off. Most of that will be nothing but residue from the spray and material that is dried on the surface. You'll not actually be removing any of the color that's attached that is permanent, but there will be some residue on there that will come off. Even after a few hours, when you wipe vinyl conditioner on for the first time, you will get a little bit of color coat off. Again, that's nothing more than just residue, dried residue that has settled onto the surface from the spray activity, and nothing to worry about. So that's it, and I hope that helps you understand a little bit more about vinyl repair.